This video is brought to you by Miniature Market. Thousands of board games, discounted prices, miniaturemarket.com.
Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here, and today we're going to be tinkerers. We're going to be making all sorts of different things using gears and such. So we're going to be making things that fly, so we can fly all around and check out cool things. We're going to be making things on wheels like motorcycles. We'll be flying down the road, and by doing this we're going to be making all sorts of sparks in our workshop, which are going to give us ways to break the rules of the game. Today we're talking about Gearworks. This is from Piecekeeper Games, and this is a sort of a tactical card game where you're going to be using different numbers and colors. It feels a little bit like Sudoku, but definitely very different. So let me show you how it's played, and I'll see you on the other side. The object of the game is to have the most points at the end of the game. And you'll be getting points by completing contraptions, sometimes with both parts that are needed, sometimes even with just one part that's needed, and you'll also be getting points by having parts that you didn't end up using in contraptions, as well as leftover sparks that you have not spent throughout the game. And the game can easily be played on a standard table. However, I'm going to transition to showing you this game on a play mat because it will help me facilitate teaching the game to you a little bit easier. Now this mat does not come with the game, it is available for an additional purchase. When it's your turn, you can simply either play a gear card or pass. When placing a gear card, one of the ways to do this is to place it on one of the empty spots that does not have a card anywhere on the grid. However, when doing so, you have to make sure that it's the only color in that column. For example, I could not place this here because it's the same color of at least one other card that's in that column. Then we look at the row order. Before I placed this, this was the only card in this row. Now when I place the second card in this row, we're going to start to see what order this row is going in. Is it going ascending from left to right, or is it going in the opposite direction? When you place this second card, if it's a different number than the card that's already there, it will help determine this. For example, we now know it's going to be going ascending left to right. So by doing that, we want to orient the cards so that the arrows are pointing in the ascending order that this card row is going. Then, if the gears that correspond with that grid placement have not been flipped, go ahead and flip them, and then make it so that the color of your tinkerer is facing that card. For example, we're the red player, so we have the red pointing to both of these. If either or both of those gears were already flipped, just turn it so that the color matches whatever tinkerer you are facing the card that you just placed. This indicates that that player currently has control of that row and column. However, when you play a card, you can tinker. How this works is from the card that you placed, you look in all four directions and look at the very next card you see. In this direction, there's no cards. That's fine. In this direction, we go here, it's a 4. Here we go up here, it's a 2. Here we go over here, and it's an 8. You take any two of the values of those cards, the closest in all four directions, and you either add any two of them or subtract any two of them. And if that number equals the number that you've placed, you've successfully tinkered. So in this case, we have a 4 and a 2. We can add those up. That adds up to 6. So that is a successful tinker. That allows you to gain an additional spark. The other way to gain a spark is to discard any 2 gear cards face down to the bottom of the deck, and you'll get 1 spark for that. And you can do this as many times as you want on your turn. What can you do with these sparks? There's 4 different ways you can spend sparks. One of them is to replace a gear card. On your turn, when you play a gear card, before we were showing you placing it in any of these open areas. Well, you can spend 2 sparks to the supply. You'd spend them and put them right here. And then you can play on top of another gear card. You pass as a way to get back in the game, assuming that all the other players did not successfully pass, which would have ended the round. So if it comes back to your turn after you've passed and there's at least one other player in, you can spend a spark back to the supply to get back into the round. You can then immediately take your turn as normal. You can also spend 1 spark to the supply to gain a gear card to your hand. You can do this as many times during your turn as you want, as long as you have the sparks to spend, and you can do it any time during your turn. The last thing you can do with spending sparks is you spend 2 to the supply to gain a contraption card, and you can do this as many times as you want on your turn and any time during your turn, obviously assuming that you have enough sparks to spend. Once all players have successfully passed, that's the end of the round, and at that point, nobody can spend more sparks to re-enter the round. First players will claim parts. You look at each column and row and you'll see which player by color is controlling that row. That player will be able to take the part corresponding with that column or row and place it in front of them. Then all players can reveal contraption cards that they'd like to build this round. Now each contraption card has 2 things that it needs, and it only needs at least one of those to be built. For example, this needs either an A, which is a wheel, or the number 1, the little winder there. In this case, we have both, so we can show that we could build this with both of these. And then we would just place this off to the side with the parts used to build it. However, if I did not have the phonograph, but in this case had the goggles, we have the winder, which is what it needs. I did not have the magnifying glass E, but I have a wheel left over that I'm not using. In this case, you'll place the unused part and the contraption with the part that was used to build it with just one to the side. No parts from previous rounds can be used to build your contraptions. Nor can you add parts from future rounds to previously built contraptions. Then each player with less parts than the leader will gain sparks according to this table. There is a variant that you can play by skipping this step by not giving out any sparks to any players. You'll play out the second and third rounds just like I showed you in the first round. You'll then go through final scoring, and you can see this at the bottom of your player aid. Now for each of the contraptions that you've built with both parts, you'll get the 9 points. For each contraption with just one of the parts, you'll get 4 points. For any unused parts, you'll get 2 points, and each spark is worth 1 point. So here I have 17 points. If it's tied, the player with the most different types of parts would win. In this case, I have 3 different types of parts. If it's still tied, the tied player with the most sets of 3 of the same parts win. Alright, well there is Gearworks. Now I want to mention that I have done a rules school for this, and those are videos where I teach you how to set up and play the game so that you don't have to read the rule book yourself. So if you want to know more of the rules, you can see that video. I'll put a link to that in the description of this video. Now, Gearworks itself, I love the art in this game. It's very clean. I like the different gears. I like how the different colors are different gears. So if you're colorblind, you could definitely tell the differences between the colors, because colors are very important. But overall, the look and feel of the game is excellent. I like that the game has simple rules but lots of depth. You're simply, most of the time, playing a card. But where do you play the card, and when do you play the card, and the timing of that, and the other cards you have, and when to use the sparks. So it's very simple mechanically, but I think the game has a lot of depth to offer. I often talk about my depth to complexity ratio. I think this is high on that, where the complexity is very low, but the depth is very high. This game is very puzzly, and I love puzzly games where you're trying to work through things. You know which types of contraptions you're trying to make, you know which columns and rows you're trying to get, you have the cards that you have, and you're just trying to decide what order should I do things in, and it's very sort of a puzzly game. If you like puzzly style games, I think you'll like this one. A big thing here is the timing of the card play, because you gotta spend a lot of sparks if you don't get to the spot that you want to get to. So a lot of it is kind of like trying to go out early and get the ones you want, but then you're sort of tipping off other players as to what row and column that you might be going for, and so they might be trying to thwart your plans and maybe spend sparks to replace your card and this and that. So timing has a big thing here, and if you're able to go last in the round, you're going to be able to be the last one to play in a certain spot and be able to keep control of it. So do you want to go out early, possibly showing your hand of what you want and gaining control, knowing that later on someone else might come by and get it right at the end of the round, but it's going to cost them more sometimes if they need to replace something, but maybe there's a spot open in that row or column that they can still play in. But again, the timing and knowing what cards you have and what order the cards are going in, a lot to think about, but I like the timing of that. I like tinkering to get sparks. When you play the card down and you look around, you see, hey, can I add or subtract to get this, to get the sparks? Because sparks are huge in this game. If you don't get sparks and you're not using them, there's no way you're going to win this game, because they're very powerful abilities, but sometimes it causes you to make placements that you normally wouldn't place, especially in the timing, as I talked about earlier. You gotta figure out when to place, how to place. Do I want to tinker now? Do I want to just go get the spot now? Again, the whole timing of the tinkering and such is, I really enjoyed this aspect of the game. Spending sparks, that's the coolest thing, because it gives you all these cool abilities like getting more contraption cards or replacing, and that's where the game's won or lost, is using those sparks. I like the special abilities of the tinkerers. Using those to, one-time abilities to kind of, twist them down and just do it. They can definitely give you a different feel for each person that's there. And I like that you can come back from being pretty far down due to the end round sparks. The last game I played with this, the most recent one, I was down so far after the first couple rounds. I thought there was no way. But because I was down, I was able to get sparks at the end of the first round and at the end of the second round, in addition to the sparks I was getting. And so I was able to come back. I was getting destroyed. I think it was like I was doubled at the end of the second round, and I was able to come back. And because I had cards and because I had sparks, I was able to actually come back and win all of the things that I needed to win to come back and win the game. And I thought that was really cool that you're never out of it. Now, anything negative about the game? This game is very mean. You are fighting for control. Think of it as sort of an area control game where you're trying to get control of certain rows and columns, and you're going to do anything you can to do that. And you're going to be messing people over. And it's very confrontational. So if you don't like confrontational games, then this game might not be for you. The tinkering, I mentioned how cool that is to kind of get the sparks, and it changes your whole decision process, and it is, but it does take some time to get used to, and it might take a few times to kind of sort of explain it to people about the closest card, and you add or subtract any two of them, and this and that. So that could be a little bit of a hurdle just kind of getting through the rules, but overall, I enjoyed the game. It's fine. I liked it as a puzzly game. Obviously, it played a little bit easier to teach with that mat, but that costs extra. So if you're looking for sort of a puzzly game that resembles Sudoku a little bit, but is kind of different, has some more gamery elements to it, and one that you can play solo, which I didn't talk about in the review, but there's a whole solo variant. You can check out my rule school for how that's played. But overall, it's one that I can recommend if you like puzzly games, and that is Gearworks.
This video was sponsored by Miniature Market's Review Corner. The Review Corner features podcasts, video, and written game reviews by gamers for gamers. Miniature Market, the online gaming superstore. Thousands of board games, discounted prices. Check them out at miniaturemarket.com.